Ever since I started my journey from unemployment to millionaire, I've had countless other people reach out to me saying that they want to start their own journey to $1 million. I've even seen a lot of other creators launch their own spin-off of my 1 to 1 million challenge, which is awesome. And across the board, one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, how does someone who is brand new with no resources and no experience start their own journey to $1 million? So in this video, I'm going to be answering that question as well as a bunch of other questions like, how do you figure out which side hustles or businesses to launch and what side hustles worked best for me? Should you start out your journey doing investing or should you not? How do you do this if you have no money or you have no social media following? And is there anything that I would change or do differently in today's economy versus when I got started? I'm going to answer all of those questions and more, and hopefully help all of you guys wanting to get started have a better understanding of how to kick off your own journey. First off, the info I'm about to share with you, I could have easily sold in a course and made a decent amount of money. This is extremely valuable information, and in the right hands, it can help you make a lot of money. So when you're watching this video, pretend like you paid a lot of money to access this info, value it, and ask yourself, if you don't have the willpower and attention span to simply sit through this entire video, then how do you ever expect to summon the willpower that's required to go out there and actually make $1 million? Everyone wants to be a millionaire, but not everyone's willing to go out there and actually do the work that's required. Okay, so you've decided you want to make $1 million starting from scratch, but how do you even begin? First things first, you need to pick a start date. One of the biggest issues that most people have is that they want to start, but they never actually do. They get stuck in the initial planning stage permanently. By picking a start date, that forces you to have a clear-cut commitment to get going. And when I first started my journey, I was overwhelmed with fear and just like the sheer scale of what I was trying to do. Keep in mind, in my life, I had never made anywhere close to $1 million before. And growing up, my dad lived in a duplex and my mom lived in the low-income apartments, like the cheapest of the cheap government-subsidized apartments. So nobody in my family had ever gotten close to making $1 million before. And at the time when I started this journey, I was on unemployment. I didn't have a social media following of any kind. My Instagram, I had like 400 followers, and I had no idea what I was going to do to actually make money. And I started by simply picking a start date and sharing that date on social media to spur myself into action and to make sure I didn't give up when things got hard. And don't underestimate how powerful this step is. You have to have people who are going to be holding you accountable. Otherwise, it's way too easy to give up when things inevitably get really, really hard. Okay, now that you have a start date, you need to start preparing to begin your journey. If you're anything like me when I first got started, more than likely you're just not prepared to actually undertake this journey in your current state. Just like somebody who wants to run an ultra marathon or somebody who wants to climb Mount Everest, the first thing you do to get started is to build a training routine. Now that might sound like overkill, and I know some of you are going to immediately excuse it, but here's the reality. You want to make $1 million. You want to do something that maybe nobody you know has ever done. Average effort equals average results, and you can either be obsessed or be average. Like I said earlier, the reality is everyone wants to make $1 million, but not everyone is willing to put in the work that's required to get there. During my journey, I would wake up each morning at 5:30 a.m. Then I would eat a healthy breakfast and work out for about an hour. During that workout, instead of listening to music, I would listen to an audiobook relating to marketing, success, mindset, business, investing, finance, productivity, etc. Usually finishing by about 6:45 a.m. Then after that, I'd usually sit down with my planner for about 5 to 10 minutes and plan out my day hour by hour, making sure that I was doing important things that would actually move me forward and not wasting my time on fluff tasks that would make me look busy but ultimately yield no result. Some other things that I did to prepare myself for my journey was I sought out successful people to surround myself with, and I cut out people that dragged me down. I started eating healthier, reducing sugar and other foods that impacted my mood and my energy. And that's the same reason I started working out, was just for mood and energy levels. I don't know why more people don't talk about this, but it's really hard to succeed when you're constantly low on energy and depressed. On top of all that, I put up whiteboards around my office and I wrote down goals to keep myself focused. I also made sure I got to bed each night at a decent hour to make sure I got 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And again, some of you guys might feel like all this is a bit excessive, but from my experience, excessive is what you have to do if you want to achieve insane results. Now, it's important to note that for most people, it's extremely difficult to even build a simple routine like this, and actually stick to it. In general, forming new habits is hard, and I recommend reading 2 books that really helped me on my journey. The first book's Atomic Habits, and the second book is The Compound Effect. Both are really great books on forming habits and how those habits can radically change your life. I also made a video on the 7 habits I use to make $1 million if you want to check that out. Next, as your start date quickly approaches, it's important that you're building up your knowledge and your skill sets during this phase, making sure that you're focusing on permanent upgrades over temporary upgrades. What I mean by this is that you're focusing on acquiring knowledge and skill sets that are extremely flexible and useful no matter what specific route you decide to take to your $1 million goal. For example, let's take marketing. Learning marketing is going to be a useful skill regardless of if you start a dropshipping business, launch your own brand, build a consulting business, try to build a social media following, start flipping houses, or become an Airbnb host. In all of those situations, a deep understanding of marketing is going to immensely benefit you. Building up your knowledge and skill set permanent upgrades allows you to increase your probability of succeeding over time. Okay, so you've been training for a while, building up your knowledge, building up your skill sets, building up your habits and your motivation so that you can go out there and dominate your $1 million goal. And finally, day 1 arrives. What do you actually do? For me, this was an extremely difficult part of my journey. Originally, the way that I thought that I would get started was by cold calling a bunch of different businesses in my area and offering to build them a website on something easy like Squarespace. I had built websites on Squarespace before. It's really easy, really anyone could do it. Yet a lot of these businesses in my area had these super outdated websites, and I knew I could add value to their business by solving this problem for them. So I went to the Chamber of Commerce website for my area, and this has like a massive list of all the different businesses that are registered members with the Chamber of Commerce. It has their name, it has their number, and I just started going through and calling all these numbers, trying to pitch them on this offer that I had created. My goal was to call 50 different businesses a day, figuring that eventually, if I was calling 50 a day, that one of those people would end up saying yes, and that was how I was gonna make some money. And I did it for 6 days in a row, and despite my best efforts, I was not able to get one person to say yes. But really not wanting to fail during my first week of the challenge, I got desperate and I called somebody that I knew. I pitched them on this idea of taking their photos and turning them into gifts and doing all of that for $100. They ended up saying yes, which was awesome. I also was able to convince someone who cold called me to give me money and support my mission. Again, I was desperate not to fail my first week, and I know it's not the coolest story, and it's definitely not how I pictured things would turn out my very first week, but it did get the job done. From there, some weeks I sold things around my house to make my goals. I tried all kinds of different side hustles, and I basically just did whatever I could piece together to get the job done each week. So I would say do what you need to get those first few wins, even if it doesn't make for the coolest story. Now, out the gate, let me state that my path will likely look a lot different from yours. I have certain skills that I'm really good at that you might not have those same skills. That's okay. You have skill sets too, and even if you don't, you can always learn. But that being said, here's a list of pretty much all the different businesses and side hustles that I tried early on in my journey. I tried Facebook ads, which ended up being a complete failure for me. I tried Pinterest, which was another failure for me. I tried flipping things on Facebook, which actually worked pretty well. I tried affiliate marketing, which worked okay, but in retrospect, there's a lot of things I could have done differently that I think would have made it a lot more successful than it was. I tried photography, which ended up being actually a huge moneymaker for me, and usually I would pair the photography with something else. So I wouldn't just do photography, I would do web design, and that would include the photos. Or like when I made those gifts for my friend, I would take the photos and I turned them into gifts. I tried launching a brand, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was a lot of risk up front because I had to pay a lot of money to actually get all these products made. It ended up being a really exciting part of my journey, but didn't actually end up making a lot of money. I did luckily make enough money from it that I was able to pay back the amount that I spent, but I didn't make a huge excess of a profit. Honestly though, in retrospect, a lot of that's my fault. I didn't choose the best product, and I think if I did it over again, I could actually do a lot better with this idea. I tried land flipping, which is basically like house flipping, only it's just a piece of land and you don't do anything to it. You basically buy a piece of land under market value and then sell it to somebody else for a lot more money. And this one took a long time for it to actually like to do the whole process, but it did work. I bought a piece of land and I was able to sell it for double what I bought it for, and I made a few $1,000s doing it. I tried something I call postal mail marketing, which was basically sort of this idea I made up, but also an idea I sort of copied from this book. It ended up working really well. It was just really difficult to scale and not something that could actually get me all the way to my $1 million goal. So I used it really early on for like my initial first few goals, but I ended up later abandoning the idea. I created a business called Levenue with a friend to help businesses market better. We got our first client by just doing free work for them, and to this day, I still make money from this business. I tried web design, and it was basically just really simple stuff using Squarespace. It's mostly like drag and drop. It's really something that anyone could do. There's no like weird coding or anything that's required to be able to do something like this. And I was able to make a decent amount of money doing web design. Again, this is another one where I got started doing work for free, and that kind of led me to get other clients. I tried content creation, where I basically pitched this business on creating content for their brand account and then trying to scale that up. And this ended up being extremely lucrative. I was able to make a lot of money doing this. And the reality is everyone these days needs social media help. And lastly, I tried Google Ads, which was another massive success for me. I would basically find businesses that needed help getting more clients. I would create a Google Ads campaign for them. I would set up a landing page. I had no idea how to do this when I first got started. It was all really, really complicated to me. I basically learned everything just watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, and like trying to figure things out by messing with it while I was setting it up. Once I felt like I had learned enough and I was proficient at doing it, I went and I found someone who would let me run their Google Ads for free. They would just pay the ad cost, but I would run and set up everything just for free on my end. And once it was getting results and I was able to prove it was making money for them, then I would start charging them. Again though, maybe not all these ways will work for you. Maybe you don't have the skill sets to do some of these things and you just don't want to learn it. They're things that aren't interesting to you. So how do you find ideas that work with your specific skill sets and your specific knowledge? Well, for me, I found most of my ideas by simply looking around and seeing what problems people or businesses had and how I could solve those problems. Every single business has problems that they need help with. What can you do to solve those problems with what you're good at? Now, obviously, having a great idea isn't all you need. You also need those businesses to hire you, and convincing them to do that can be really difficult. That's why for me, I would usually do free work to get my foot in the door, show them that I can solve that problem, and then I would charge once I proved I could actually help. Now, getting work can be a lot easier if you invest in building your own personal brand really early on. A personal brand is a massive advantage that can help you no matter what path you decide to take. It's honestly overpowered, and I genuinely believe anyone who's not investing into a personal brand these days is at a severe disadvantage. One of my favorite books to read on this subject is Crushing It by Gary Vee. I built my personal brand on first TikTok and then YouTube, and although I didn't utilize it as much as I could have on my journey to $1 million, it has been undeniably helpful along the way. A personal brand allows you to essentially have this like built-in marketing machine no matter what business you decide to start or what path you decide to take. Even if you wanted to like say simply get a job, having a personal brand is a massive advantage over every single other person who doesn't have a personal brand. Having a personal brand gives you automatic authority that's going to have different companies and businesses seeking you out rather than the other way around. And you don't have to have a massive following to do this either. I got a lot of my photography work from my Instagram that had less than 500 followers, but you do have to be intentional and put your skill set out there on display. Now, it wasn't until I had done all these side hustles and made almost $100,000 that I finally started doing investing. I think a lot of people followed the second half of my journey a lot more because it was more exciting because I was getting closer to my goal, and therefore emphasized the investing aspect way too much. In my opinion, investing is what you do after you've built up sources of income and a lot of capital to actually invest with. I started investing because at a certain point I realized that my side hustles just weren't scalable anymore, and there's no way I was going to hit my goal if I didn't start putting my money to work. And investing, again, is something where you need to be obsessed or be average. When I started investing, I dedicated a ridiculous amount of time and effort into learning how to be a good investor, understanding finance, global economies, specific projects and how they actually work, economics, DeFi, tokenomics, behavioral psychology, market psychology, macro debt, finance history, and more. Was it overkill? I don't think so. Investing is really, really hard, and you really have to know what you're doing if you want a chance at doing well. Each bit of education when it comes to investing is like slightly tipping the odds in your favor. Tip the odds enough, and you could win a whole lot more than you lose. To this day, I am still a student of investing, and I spend tons of time every every single day learning and growing my skills and abilities because it is just ridiculously difficult to invest well. I have an entire video on investing here if you want to check it out. Now, obviously, things have changed since I started my journey. I get people who ask me occasionally if it's still possible in today's environment to do $1 million journey like I did. And my answer is absolutely. I started my journey at the height of COVID when most businesses were shutting their doors permanently. A lot of people didn't want to work with me because they were uncertain about the future and what was going to happen. Back then, also, the markets crashed hard. Bitcoin fell from $9,000 all the way back down to $5,000. People were freaking out, things looked bleak, and that was the environment that I got started in. Today, again, it's another bad economic environment, and a lot of people use that as an excuse to not even try in the first place. Don't be one of those people. There are always going to be excuses that you're going to be able to find on why you can't succeed. Instead, come up with reasons why you will succeed. Say to yourself, I am going to, by pure force of will, forge the future that I want, and all of these roadblocks, all of these hurdles are in my way. I'm going to literally just punch them in the face until they collapse and I'm able to get to where I want to go, because nothing is going to stop me from hitting my goal. Don't wait for ideal conditions to arise. The perfect time to get started is always today. If this video is helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to let me know that you're starting your journey to $1 million, let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button, but you got to also hit the little bell next to it to actually be notified each time I release a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.